Primus is an ancient title. In fact, the Scottish Church was unable to appoint an archbishop for a number of years because we were waiting for the king we were still supporting to make an appointment, and that was the Stuart kings. That failed to happen, and the College of Bishops, the bishops of the time, decided they really needed someone who could chair their meetings. So that became the role of the Primus inter pares. That's developed over the years with the development of the Anglican Communion, so that in effect the Primus becomes the primate of Scotland for the Scottish Episcopal Church, and therefore is given the title Most Reverend, but has not a metropolitan authority. That's held by the college. So I live in an interesting world where in one part of the communion I'm expected to speak on behalf of the Scottish Episcopal Church. Of course, at home, I then get reminded by my colleagues when I've overstepped the mark. But very graciously and very delightfully, they do that. Much of what we're involved in is the life of Scotland and where there are difficulties. I mean, there is issues to do with child poverty. The country itself has had figures and statistics that show that child poverty is actually is increasing rather than decreasing. We are closely involved in the work of the Scottish Parliament. We spend time having conversations with MSPs and with people in government, really looking at ways in which we can help and enhance the need for homes for the refugees, how we can work with the society to make it more inclusive and more open. And we were always so delighted that the government wants to have those conversations. Of course, we also have another agenda, which is to bring the love of Christ to as many people as possible. I mean, it always intrigues me how rarely sometimes I hear the word Jesus being used, because that's what we're about, is enabling people to discover the love of Jesus. And so we're trying to find ways of doing that in a society which everyone tells me is quite secular. I've yet to meet people who don't at least want to have the conversation. They might want to argue with me, but they want to have the conversation. So because I have doors open for me, people want to have the opportunity to meet with this peculiar thing called a Primus, then able to spend time talking about the really important stuff, which is that people are loved by God. I don't feel it confused because actually we work really closely ecumenically with the Church of Scotland. So it's very rare that the Church of Scotland are getting involved in something without them also having a conversation with us. The Scottish Government have made it clear that there may be churches which have a belief that they are more central, but the government doesn't operate like that. It operates, in fact, if it operates at all with faith, it's interfaith, it's multi-faith conversations. So I was at a multi-faith conversation with the First Minister just the other week, to which the moderator was there, and myself and the Archbishop. So there is a sense in which the devolved government in Scotland, because it was starting with a clean sheet, has been able to involve all people of faith, and of course people without faith. So we don't find ourselves, as we probably used to, sort of sitting on the sidelines, itching to have something to say. We are included in those conversations. But that's because we're prepared to work ecumenically and to see that for Scotland what's important, that there's a Christian voice rather than necessarily an Episcopalian voice. We always have to start with the fact that people think they know what their history is. I use the word think quite deliberately. So you're always starting on the point where people will challenge you on arguments, on sectarianism, on the issues which are really live issues in Scotland. So you always feel like you're being back-footed. But actually, we live in a society where people see that there is inequality, where they see that there are people who are really struggling and suffering. And if you're an organisation which is beginning to try and address those, then people will want to know, well, why do you want to address that? Well, the reason I want to address that is because I'm commanded by Christ to turn the other cheek, walk the extra mile, and do all of the necessary things to bring the love of God. So it opens the opportunity. We were recently given a pub about a year and a half ago. And it's been fascinating because once every few months I end up behind the bar. That was my trade. I've yet to meet anybody who looks at me and says, I don't want to talk to you. They all want to say, explain to me how you can be standing there and believe in God. People want the conversations. We have to have the courage to turn the conversations from being simply to do with well-being to being conversations about God. Well, the Craskin, because many, in my own diocese of Murray Ross and Caithness, many of the congregations don't meet in church buildings. They don't have church buildings. So they meet in community buildings. 2 members of our church ran and owned this 5-bedroomed inn. And I jokingly said to the local priest, if he wanted to show off and really prove his worth, he should try and get a congregation at the Crask, which is 12 miles from anywhere. And he did. And I dedicated a congregation of 30-odd people. The owners reached retirement and donated and gave the whole building to the church. We made the decision that we needed to have something which wasn't a drain on resources, but was a strength to the resources. So 2 members of the diocese are now, husband and wife, are now running it as a commercial business. We hold worship there regularly, morning and evening prayer daily, 2 Eucharists a month. And when I go up to take the Eucharist, then we stay overnight. It's a lovely moment of respite for me. So what more natural when they're busy for me to pour a couple of pints of Red Kite beer and speak to the customers. It's been a wonderful experience, and people from all over the country are now coming there as a place of respite and good hospitality, which of course is what the church should always be, good hospitality. It is to do with, I mean, my own home, Bishop's House, above the door, we have a scallop shell, a sign of hospitality, welcome for pilgrims. That's the fundamental basis of where we start. How do you speak to people about God? By making them welcome. Then they want to have that conversation. And that's writ large at the Craskin.